Good afternoon. Some of the committee members will be coming in. They've been notified that they've been late. They'll be late. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I am Sharon Green Middleton, Vice President of the City Council, representative for the 6th Council District, and chairperson for the Economic and Community Development Committee. This afternoon, we will hear the following bills: Bill number 22-0250 and 23-0153R. In attendance today, we have Councilman Mark Conway of the 4th District, member of the committee, Odette Ramos of the 14th District, member of the committee and sponsor of both bills. And we have Matt Peters, that's staff to the committee, and representatives from the Council President's Office. I see online Tiffany Macklin, Deputy Director for Legislation, and representative from the Mayor's Office. I see Sophia G. and also Nina Thimulis. And we also have joining us member of the committee, Ryan Dorsey of the 3rd District. Let's begin, and we'll start with Bill number 22-0250. The Councilmember Mary Pat Clark Opportunity to Purchase Act for the purpose of repealing City Code Article 13, Subtitle 6, Tenant's Right of First Refusal, as obsolete, and replacing it with a subtitle establishing the tenant's opportunity to purchase certain rental facilities, defining certain terms, establishing certain exemptions from the subtitle, providing for certain rules of interpretation, authorizing the Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development to adopt rules and regulations to carry out the subtitle, requiring that a landlord provide a notice of offer to certain persons on deciding to sell a rental facility, establishing certain procedures for landlords and tenants in instances where a party substitutes a statement of interest to purchase a rental facility, allowing for the landlord to require certain earnest money deposits, permitting the assignment of certain rights, prohibiting a waiver of certain rights absent agreed on consideration, requiring certain disclosures if a rental facility is transferred to a party other than a tenant, requiring certain reports, providing for certain penalties, and generally relating to providing tenants with the opportunity to purchase certain rental facilities. This bill was introduced on June 27, 2022. This bill was sponsored by Councilmember Ramos. Councilmember Ramos, would you like to make some comments?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. This legislation comes from really a legacy of work of my predecessor. She introduced legislation to create the right of first refusal legislation way back when she was a council member, before she was council president. And the idea was that residents would negotiate with the landlord if the landlord wanted to sell the property. In one of the rare occasions that she was not in office, the bill was watered down a little bit, which included another exemption to the rule that said that if a landlord or owner lists the property on the open market, then the tenant would still have to compete with all of the other buyers. So fast forward to now. Well, let me just back up and just say that in 1997, I actually bought my first house with the original law. so that on the 2500 block of Guilford Avenue, The landlord said, hey, we're about to sell, we're offering you this price, and I was able to buy that house. And I know of several others who've been able to buy properties, but also others who have not been. And so now that we're looking to have more renters into homeowners, it made sense to try to look back at this law and see what needed to be done to make it much easier for the tenants. So what this bill does is it, first of all, is only relevant for single-family rental properties. This is not for multi-units. It also, with the amendments, removes that clause that I had described earlier. In the original code, it's exemption 11. We are removing that. And we are removing any other references to third-party contracts. We are also updating definition of landlord and owner. We are updating language because the original law had a lot of he's and hims in it, and that's not relevant anymore. We are adding reporting requirements so that DHCD and the City Council has a better sense of what's actually happening out there relative to this process. There was in my bill a clause that I missed, and we are removing that as well, which was the law department's concern about adding third parties to the mix, and so we're not doing that. And we added an enforcement clause. In the final package of amendments that I sent about an hour and a half ago, we also had a couple of technical amendments that the department had suggested, and they outlined in their report that we put in. And so that's basically the outline of the bill. I guess what I'll just do is just walk everyone through how this would work. So landlord says to the tenant, hey, I'm thinking about selling this house. I'm offering it at X price, and the tenant has 14 days to negotiate, but also to come up with whether or not they would be interested in going through the process. So at day, sometime within that 14 days, they would send in a letter of intent saying, yes, I want to be a part of this process and negotiate. Then they would sign a regular Maryland contract with the owner, and that starts the clock for when they go and get their financing and are able to do all the home inspections and everything else. So that's that, really. That's what we did in this bill to just make it a lot easier for the tenants to have a better opportunity, basically, to purchase the property. Some people have asked me why the change from right of first refusal to tenant opportunity to purchase, because it really is more of a tenant opportunity to purchase. I'm open to changing that back to first refusal if the committee desires. So I also thought to name this after my predecessor to just make sure that it's clear how the history of how all this has happened, and to honor her in this way. So I would also just say that in the package of amendments that I sent out, the HABC suggestion was not put in, but I'm accepting it. So if we pass the bill out, they just want to be exempted from the law, which makes sense. Because they do have scatter sites, and that's a whole different situation in terms of how this works. So that would be the only thing that we would have to add. Otherwise, I've included all of the agency's concerns in the amendments, and I'm grateful for everyone's support, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Does any council committee member have any questions for the sponsor of the bill? And we also have member of the committee, vice chair of the committee, Councilman John Bullock of the 9th District. Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee will now hear from agency representatives, and we'll start with the City Solicitor's Office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hillary Rulli on behalf of the City Solicitor's Office. With the amendments that the Councilwoman has put forward, there's no longer any legal issue with the bill, and we would approve the bill as proposed to be amended.
Thank you. Department of Finance.
Good afternoon, everyone. Laura Larson, Budget Director representing the Department of Finance. We stand by our response and do not oppose the legislation or the amendments.
Thank you. Housing Authority.
Crystal Hypoli, the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. We stand by our report. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals. Thank you. Department of Planning. Thank you. And the Office of Equity and Civil Rights.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tyler Schnella, Legislative Liaison for the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. So we conducted a racial equity impact assessment on the legislation, and we concluded that it will likely improve economic and housing opportunities for Black, Latine, and other residents of color in Baltimore City. And of course, we want to acknowledge that redlining and racial covenants on top of decades of restrictions on wealth building opportunities have led to dramatic inequities in home ownership rates across racial groups in Baltimore City. 58% of white households own their homes, while 43% of Black households and 44% of Latine households own their homes. Therefore, Black, Latine, and other residents of color are more likely to rent than white residents. And as a result, any changes to the law regarding tenants' rights of first refusal is more likely to impact Black, Latine, and other residents of color in the city of Baltimore, which brought us to our primary concern with the bill initially, where the language that would provide the protection for tenants who may use government assistance programs to assist in the purchase of their rental dwelling units would be removed through the repeal of the current law and not added to the bill. However, we worked with the sponsor, and she did introduce an amendment that will put that vital protection back into this legislation. And then, of course, as we mentioned in our report, not only are households of color more likely to rent, but when they rent, their rent is more likely to be unaffordable and reliant on public subsidy. And one metric for affordability is rent burden, which measures what percentage of a household's income goes towards rent. And the higher the percentage, the higher the burden on the family. So in Baltimore City, Black and Latine households experience the highest rates of rent burden. And in rental and mortgage markets, people of color are often subjected to predatory rents and predatory mortgage loans by banks. So, and that brings us to our secondary concern with the bill regarding the opportunity to mandate the creation of an education program for renters who would want to utilize this bill to inform them on how to utilize the opportunity of first refusal, local, state, and federal resources available to first-time home buyers, the risks associated with purchasing a home, how to report non-compliance with the law, and how to report discrimination on the part of their landlord under the protections that would be amended back into the bill, which would be something that the Community Relations Commission, which lives in our office, would be able to investigate. And I say that to say that we believe that the bill could empower households of color to work with their landlords and purchase their rental properties to increase ownership in communities where it is lacking. However, the information that we just mentioned should be shared to ensure that those seeking to take advantage of this opportunity to purchase can do so in an informed manner. Thank you.
Thank you for that detailed information. Any questions from the committee? Councilwoman Ramos?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out that the suggestion around the education piece is really important. So I'm grateful for that. In the last set of amendments, I did include that DHCD would have a spreadsheet, or a fact sheet on their website that the landlord would have to, or the tenant could download and get information about their rights under this bill, about going to first-time home buyer education, and all of those things. So it is embedded in the bill that information is mandated that the landlord has to provide, but it would also be that they can download off of the website, but it can also be something that, as all of us are educating about this bill, can utilize on the DHC website, and DHCD has agreed to do that. So it adds we've added that. And then, of course, the concern about the protected classes I did put back in. So thank you.
And then last but not least, housing and community development.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Stephanie Murdoch, Director of Legislative Services for DHCD. We have had the opportunity to review the bill and the amendments and work collaboratively with the sponsor to address some of our concerns. I just want to highlight a few items from our bill report. I should note that the new duties that will be assigned to the commissioner will require the hiring of an additional full-time employee to assist landlords meet not only the reporting requirements, but also to collect and compile the data required for our annual report, and to take on any other duties as necessary to meet to the parameters of the bill. We will also need to develop new processes and procedures for landlords to easily report either in person or through an online portal, which may either require the expansion of one of our existing IT softwares or the purchasing of new software. The sponsor mentioned that we've worked collaboratively on amendments, such as clarifying that this applies to single-family dwelling units. And additionally, we were able to work on an amendment to create a 180-day enactment date in order for us to have time to not only stand up the program, but also to help educate the public. The council member also spoke of the new educational piece that is being added by amendment to the bill in order to protect tenants. We recommended language about providing the tenants with an information sheet about obtaining real estate agents and understanding agency in the state of Maryland. So this bill is very much in line with the work that we are doing at DHCD already. Transitioning tenants into their homes as homeowners is a key strategy to creating stability in our city. And as part of our middle neighborhood strategy, we also do a lot of work through our Office of Homeownership and Housing Preservation that provides a variety of resources for homeowners and future homeowners in Baltimore City, everything from weatherization and energy efficiency, home rehabilitation and repairs, lead remediation, and home ownership incentives. And most of these programs are only available to homeowners. So this would create new opportunities for those new homeowners to participate in some of these programs. Finally, this is also a bill that could potentially support other programs in the city that encourage homeownership. For instance, Live Baltimore's Buy Back the Block program, which provides grants to eligible Baltimore City residents to purchase homes in areas where they currently rent. And these are 10,000 home purchase grants and 20,000 home purchase and renovation grants. So we can see how this potentially could be paired together to benefit our tenants. In closing, we do not object to the passage of this bill. We appreciate working with the sponsor on these amendments, and we stand by to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the committee? Hearing none, the committee will now take public testimony. And before we start with the in-person testimony, if you are online and would like to testify on this bill, please make sure you use the raise hand button to let us know that you want to testify. So we'll now start with those that have signed in person.
Ms. Seltzer stepped out.
Okay.
She left her stuff, so she's coming back.
Okay, and the one person that has signed in has stepped out at this time. So what we're going to do is go back to and start with the online, and okay. Ms. Seltzer, we're ready to have you on. if you're testifying on the Councilmember Mary Pat Clark Opportunity to Purchase Act, are you signed up to testify on that bill? Crystal is it with HABC, and she's already testified. Did you want me to do the online while you get yourself together, and I can come back to you? That's quite all right. We'll go. That's okay. We'll go with the go with the attendees that raise your hand if you want to testify on this bill. And it looks like we don't have any, but we do see some callers. We're now going to unmute a caller. Call in user number 2 with the 301 number. Can you hear us?
They may have no testimony.
Okay. We're going to try another caller. Can you hear us? Caller number user 3. Okay, no
Yes, I can
response.
hear you, but I don't have any questions or testimony. Thank you.
Okay. I think that covers it with callers. Ms. Seltzer, are you ready? I think you're the only one that's going to be testifying on this bill. And you can push that red button to the right. You should see the... It'll turn red. It'll turn red when you push the black button. The other one. And you can pull that down a little bit.
I'm not ready yet.
We hear you. You're good. Please say your name and who you represent, and you're on. Matt, she has something she's handing out. And you have one for every committee member?
Hi, my name is Cheryl Seltzer. I live in Liberty Square. I firmly oppose and believe that we should have our 47-year precedent at the tenant's first refusal, right of first refusal completely intact. The issue is that there's no waiver. The issue is that the first reader, it's not obsolete. In fact, Berkeley and the whole state of Massachusetts are currently putting together their type of tenant's first right of refusal. The new bill does not address bulk sale. The new bill does not protect use of governmental assistance. We're talking about first reader. The opportunity to purchase. Before a landlord may settle in the sale of a rental facility, the landlord shall give the tenant opportunity to purchase the rental facility at a price and terms. What you have now, what you have here is the tenant has to compete with other buyers. Certain rental facilities offering homes for purchase is a clear bait and switch. Your home is not as good as this one. You'll like this one. Well, I have. This is written very specifically to people who have multi-houses, that own multi-houses. It's written specific. So why don't you live in Carrollton Ranch? Why don't you take all your kids and families and just move and change your school, and don't have your neighborhood friends anymore, and people who are now seniors, lived in their houses, grew up, their children grew up there, and now you just leave. I'm personally affected from in Portland, Oregon, and in California, Berkeley, California, where the people are sleazy. It's no mom and pop anymore. We have big conglomerates. You don't know who the owners are. And statement of interest. Statement of interest means a written and clear expression of interest to a landlord that the person writing the statement is interested in purchasing the landlord's rental facility. This means that the tenant must try to find some multi-conglomerate LLC who knows who owns it with the management companies. They don't want to be bothered. They only see tenants as a commodity. So Portland, Oregon, middle of the winter, the owner changed hands, the conglomerate, the complex. Welcome, here's where you write a check. 2 days later, no cause notice for 43 days, you're out of here. What did they do? They made them condominiums. They always skirt the law every chance they get. So the 30 days of being able to put together something, well, you should be ready before 30 days, and that's the real issue of being able to buy your house that you're paying 2 to 3 times more in rental, because there's no rental control in Baltimore, and instead have a mortgage that is a whole lot less. The city is at least 53% at least rentals. You cannot have a healthy city if the majority of people are renters. In Berkeley, California, the owner put the house on, I had no idea. 3 weeks after, a neighbor crossed the street, because I was noticing these people. I'm like, why are all these people showing up at my house in a fourplex here? And he's like, don't you know, it's on the market. It terrorizes people to have to leave, to have to keep moving over and over and over again. And that's what I've done. It took me nearly 4 years to buy a house because of tremendous amount of discrimination, having contracts only for owners to go find somebody else with the ratified contract to sell it to somebody else, knowing I couldn't probably get a lawyer in time, because that's not what Maryland Legal Aid does or anybody else. So I'm vehemently against this. I wrote Odette. She's tried to fix some things, which is not a fix. It's all gobbledygook. And Mary Pat Clark has nothing to do with you. I wrote to Odette, let's work on a federal law with her name and is it Mr. or Mrs. Fisher? Let's do something great with this. But don't extinguish something that's been working. And if you want to build on it, why the hell are you getting rid of it?
Could you kind of wrap
Done.
up? Thank you.
And one more thing, I sent you well over a year ago, before this quote inception of this bill, a plan to get poverty from 23 to 5%, people having entrepreneurships through vocational art schools, being able to fix the houses and getting licenses. And here I give it to you again, well over a year. This is where you focus.
Ms. Seltzer, thank you for your testimony. And looking on the list, we have no one else that is testifying in person. Do committee members have any comments or questions at this time before we move to the amendments? And Councilwoman Ramos, do you have any comments on the amendments before we can go ahead, if you want to go over any main points about your amendments?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just again, to go over the amendments, they're pretty significant to make sure that we get this corrected. Really, again, what we're trying to do here is to get back to the original intent of what my predecessor had authored oh so long ago, and take away the exception that was brought in several years ago that said that if a landlord puts the house up on the market, then they're exempt from, these laws. And so what we're actually doing is making this a much stronger law for tenants. I think that I've gone over most of the amendments. Here, let me just do this. So the first big one, obviously, is to make sure that the title is correct. And we have Councilmember Mary Pat Clark, tenant opportunity to purchase, just to be very clear about that. We have put in the dwelling unit and the definition, and made sure that it's in the correct code to make sure that it's the single family is there. We have put back the original definition of landlord to make it super clear that it's the owner of the property making these decisions. We have taken out all references to rental facility and just substituted everything that said rental facility to say dwelling unit, so that it's clear that is the dwelling unit that is referred to in the building code, which is the single family property. We have put in, we took out, and that's on page 4 of the reprint, what I called exemption 11, which was the dealing with the real estate, putting the house on the market. We have taken out any reference to third-party contracts, and we have put back in the language to protect the protected classes and also using government financing. We've also, instead of mandating what type of deposit would be used or how much should be used in the deposit, we just used an earnest money deposit so that the tenant is not mandated at a certain amount. And we have put back in the versions of the affidavit that has to be filed if the tenant does not move forward with this, so that it is recorded with DHCD, and also the statement of intent, and then the reporting, and also a enforcement provision, so that if there is a complaint, and the complaint would likely go to the Office of Civil Rights, that there would be fines of up to $1,000. So that's really the gist of the amendments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions about the amendment to the committee? Is there a motion to move the sponsors' amendments as a package? Before we
Oh,
do
yeah.
that,
I just wanted to make sure that it's clear, the enactment date is going to be 180 days and not 30 days. So that is in here.
motion to move the amendments?
So moved.
Second?
So moved by Councilman Bullock and second by Councilwoman Ramos. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Is there a
You need to use your microphone.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Is there a motion to?
Madam Chair, just real quick, do we want to
Yes.
adopt the HABC amendment, or do we want to do that in second reader? It's not formally
So
written in
you-
here, so.
So we'll go ahead and adopt that amendment. And do we have to vote on that separately?
Yeah, we have to vote
Okay.
on it. We have to
Let's
vote
go
on it
ahead and
separately.
vote on it separately.
So just for clarification, in the HABC report, they are basically asking for, to be one of the exemptions of the law.
And
So
that was the Housing Authority's
The Housing
amendment. Is there a
Authority.
motion to move the Housing Authority amendment? So moved.
Second.
By Conway, second by Ramos. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And yes, you have, and I do want to recognize Councilmember Stokes of the 12th District, member of the committee. Okay, all right. Is there a motion to recommend the bill favorable with amendments?
So moved.
So moved by Ramos, second by, is that Bullock? Chair Middleton is a yes. Bullock? Yes. Is a yes. Conway? Yes. Is a yes. Dorsey? Yes. Is a yes. Glover absent. Ramos? Yes. Is a yes. And Stokes, you abstain? Because of just getting here. Gotcha. Okay, this bill will move to second reader at the next council meeting, and remember that we also are going to have to receive that one amendment in writing as well. The next bill, Resolution 23-0153R, investigative hearing, vacant building water shutoffs, for the purpose of inviting representatives from the Department of Public Works, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and the Department of Real Estate, the Baltimore Fire Department, and the Office of the City Administrator to report on why Section 116-4-6 of the Baltimore City Building Code, which requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to inform the Department of Public Works that there is a vacant building and that the water must be shut off, is not being implemented. The impact of not implementing this section of the building code and a path toward implementation. This bill was sponsored by Councilwoman Ramos. Councilwoman Ramos, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues. This is a resolution just to hear and understand a little bit more, and I have to say we did have small conversations about this during budget hearings and other hearings related to vacant properties. But the idea being that once a vacant property is deemed vacant, that the water would be shut off. We have seen many examples of when the water is not shut off, additional damage to the property, which raises costs if it's going to be rehabbed. Obviously, the most important one, which is in the wintertime, damaged pipes, which then residents who live next door end up having to deal with. And so wanted to have this hearing to understand a little bit more about, and I want to thank the DHCD and DPW and the Mayor's Office and the City Administrator for, upon my initial inquiry several months ago, had started the process of understanding this issue and coming up with their solution to how to implement this law. It is actually a law, Section 116-4-6 in the building code. So today we will hear an update on where they are. If you look at the DHCD report, it's very clear that they're going to be establishing sort of tiers, where if the property is ready to rehab and, it would be more of a pain to, shut off the water and come back on. But if it's a home that's been vacant for so long, that water really needs to come off. So we'll hear from them about that. And I will say that I don't see them here, but BGE had suggested that they would like a similar notice so that they could turn off the power. Because we have seen where, obviously, we've got devastating fires if the power and gas are still a factor. Again, I don't see them here, but if they are here, hopefully they'll testify. So that's kind of what we're doing today, and Madam Chair, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. I also want to recognize member of the committee, Councilman Glover of the 13th District is present with us today. The committee will now hear from agency representatives, City Solicitor's Office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hillary Rulli, on behalf of the City Solicitor's Office, we would approve the resolution for form and legal sufficiency. Thanks.
Thank you, Hillary. Department of Finance.
Good afternoon. This is Sophia from the Mayor's Office of Government Relations on behalf of Finance. Finance does not see any financial implication at this point, and thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll move to Department of Housing and Community Development, Stephanie Murdoch.
Thank you again, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Stephanie Murdoch, Director of Legislative Services for DHCD. We are pleased to participate in this hearing to talk about not only the existing processes and procedures, but also make recommendations toward a path towards implementation of the existing law. Currently, we refer cases on a case-by-case basis to DPW, and it does vary. There are some cases, as the sponsor mentioned, where an immediate cutoff is not warranted. For instance, if a property is newly vacant and permits have been pulled and it's likely to be abated quickly. And there are other situations where an expeditious cutoff is necessary, such as when we become aware of a water leak or a burst water pipe, to name a few. Squatters are another common issue. And then in those cases, we typically contact DPW's wastewater division directly. So as you mentioned, Councilwoman, we have been working collaboratively with DPW throughout 2022 to talk about this issue and how we could better coordinate and really develop a strategic approach for shutting off water to vacant homes. We began an informal cross-agency water shut-off work group, and we started working on tiered methodology to address water cutoffs for vacant properties in a systematic and structured approach. Some of the goals of this work group are to prevent water damage to existing vacant structures due to burst pipes, decrease the risk of water damage to next-door neighbors, and also decrease the risk of attracting squatters. So a little bit about the methodology that we've developed. The tiers were created with the goal of not unnecessarily impeding rehabilitation of vacant properties. For example, properties that are scheduled for demolition are not going to be rehabbed, so they are included in Tier 1, which is the first group to be for cutoff. And then on the other hand, buildings that have open permits and are likely to be rehabbed are further down on the list. So we have created 5 tiers. The first tier is for properties in the demolition pipeline. The second tier is properties that have a VBN issued that's over 10 years, no open permits, and a deed date that's older than 1 year old. Our third category of tiers is a VBN issued 5 years ago, no open permits, and a deed date older than 1 year. On to our fourth category, VBN issued less than 5 years ago, no open permits, and not in one of DHCD's project impact investment areas, major redevelopment areas, community development zones, or development division projects. And then down to Tier 5, all remaining VBNs. And this is a list that will be cyclical. Properties will come on and off, and reevaluation of the tiers will be necessary throughout the course of this implementation. So we have included a sample breakdown of what this would look like throughout the districts and going through the different tiers. And we believe this is a much more manageable approach, especially for the workload that the DPW is expected to take on. So we are committed to working not only with the administration, but also DPW to continue to discuss ways that we can lessen the impact of these vacant properties and coordinate a response to water shutoffs. We stand by to answer any questions you may have, and I don't know if I mentioned that I'm joined by Deputy Commissioner Hessler here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to Housing, Councilmember Stokes.
Yes, can you explain to me what the law is? And I only want to ask that because when the city goes on private property, we can't cut people's grass. We got to have right of entry or something like that. I'm concerned about shutting off people's water because the house is vacant. You don't know how long it was vacant. We might know how long it's vacant. But could you explain the law? Because it's a little iffy for me to just, because the house become vacant and now the city getting into shutting off water. If the water pipe's not busted, there's no water running. I need to explain that to me. What did that mean in terms of the law? I know my councilwoman said it was the law. I'd like to know what the actual law is.
Between housing and DPW, would you like to chime in?
Yes, Jason Hessler, Baltimore City Department of Housing Community Development. Under the Baltimore City Building Code, the Department of Housing is required to notify the Department of Public Works when a vacant building notice has been issued on a property. And that gives with the vacant building notice, the city has the authority to go onto a property to make any corrections necessary. And we often board properties, cut grass, clean properties, take off rear additions or hanging pieces that are dangerous, and even demolish properties without any additional notice in some cases, where it ends up being an emergency. So the building code and the violation notice puts an owner on notice that they're required to take certain actions and to repair the property. In regards to cutting off water specifically, there is an overlap there where we're required to give notice to the Department of Public Works. However, there are, I'll kick to DPW to discuss what their code allows or doesn't allow in regards to the cutoff.
So real quick, before you go there, so you're saying that if we have a emergency demo on a house, you will go ahead and demo the house. But if somebody's house, the house is vacant, then we can just go ahead and turn this service off because the house is vacant. I just heard, I heard a statement, case by case, am I correct? So it's like, I mean, in the wintertime, I can see if it's wintertime, pipes freeze up, water running, yeah. But we actually gonna go on somebody's property because the house got a vacant building notice. We just gonna go in there without letting the owner of the property know that we're gonna turn off their water service. Is that what you actually explained?
Our current process is a case-by-case basis. So we have not been going out and sending DPW a list of properties for them to just.
So, but real quick, before you go, so do you contact the owner of the property? Because you said saying you just gonna case by case. So I'm an owner of property, my property is vacant. Y'all just go turn it off without letting me know. Is that what you actually saying? Because if it's case by case, the case could, that sound like that could be the case every time. Right. You ain't gotta contact the owner.
We may or we may not, depending on the situation. So in many cases with vacant buildings, there is no one to contact. The people are deceased, there is no estate, there's no will, it's a forfeited corporation. So, in the majority of properties that we deal with where these problems occur, there is no owner.
But that doesn't,
anytime,
I'm sorry, but that statement doesn't say you never can get in contact with an owner because everybody not dead, everybody cannot hard to get in contact with. So how can we just use those two cases saying we're gonna do it anyway because nobody called, the person might be dead? How do you determine somebody is dead? I mean, how do you determine, that you can't get in touch with somebody? So we don't send them no email, no certified mail, nothing, just, well, we can't get in touch with them. We just gonna go on their property and turn their service off because the building is vacant?
so how it's been done and when we cut off service, we've made those attempts to get it rectified. So the case-by-case basis is generally because a neighbor is suffering from pipes that have burst and there's flooding. So we're trying to make contact with whoever we can to get them to deal with the problem, and that, either we're not able to get them.
But I understand that part. That makes a lot of sense to me, whether it's in the summertime or wintertime. But I'm saying we just gonna go on somebody's property because of a vacant building notice, turn it off. Because it's vacant.
Councilman Bullock, I think, has been yearning to chime in on this subject.
I just a point of clarity, I think this may help, because I know sometimes in Baltimore, we have this challenge between a vacant building versus one that's a vacant building notice. And so one that has a VBN is open to casual entry has some other challenges that make it a little bit different than just a regular vacant, if you will. So I think that's probably the distinction that you're speaking of versus what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I think that's.
Well, yeah, I am certainly only talking about buildings that have a vacant building notice. So the agency has sent a violation notice by certified and regular mail to the tax address, to any registration address that the person's provided online. And in many cases, we do additional research and send it to additional addresses. We post the property. All vacant properties in Baltimore City are required to be registered by the owner. So, the owner should be providing us with the best address, not just the tax address, but the best address, phone number, and email to contact them. So where we have that, we put them on notice that they have a vacant building and they have responsibilities to take care of that vacant building. If the need arises to go onto that property, to cut it, to board it, to correct some kind of damage that's impacting others, or even to turn off the water service, we've made contact through that vacant building notice, and we have every legal right to go on the property and take the action necessary.
DPW, did you want to add anything on your end of, for your agency?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Marcia Collins, Janelle Mummy, and Mohammed Rahman, representing the Department of Public Works here today in support of this legislation. Councilman, I think you're raising issues of concern that are inherent in having these vacant buildings and what we can and cannot do and what makes sense to do. When this law was first passed, at the time, I believe there was over 16,000 vacant buildings in the city of Baltimore. And when you're confronted with a list of 16,000 addresses, where do you start? So a lot of our work was done for health and safety reasons, and by that I mean broken pipes, issues affecting an adjacent neighbor, perhaps a break that's affecting the actual structure itself. But we also knew that in order to work with and reduce the amount of opportunities for things to happen at these vacant buildings relative to water, we would have to do some sort of methodical approach. And I just want to point out that the conversations we've had with HCD and law and others have been very helpful to us. It is a much different situation to prioritize a list, and those are the tiers that Stephanie spoke about very clearly. That helps us to get at, number one, we're going to demolition the property, let's get these taken care of. They might occur at a later time, but they're on the demo list. Let's give top priority to that because we know there's not going to be any rehab, the structure isn't going to be there, and so that makes sense to get those out of the way. The second tier is looking at, excuse me, vacant building notices that were issued more than 10 years ago. So obviously, in response to what Mr. Hessler has mentioned, not only have we been unable to make any significant contact with an owner who may be deceased for all we know or living out of state, not really caring, after 10 years, one would presume that there's not a lot going to be happening with that property. And, there's no open permits being pulled, so those would be here too. And working our way down our list gives us, number one, an easier number in which to tackle and be successful because, as Mr. Hessler points out, these lists change. Sometimes somebody decides, oh, I'm going to renovate, permits start getting pulled. Well, they have to get off the list because we don't want to cut the service off unless the owner is requesting it. I would say that all these turnoffs that we're performing are happening within the meter vault. We're not on people's property. We're turning it off at the service. And so we don't have to worry about trespass. And the fact that we've had no success in reaching the owner makes us feel that this is an appropriate turnoff to do. If the owner finally surfaces and they want to restore the service, we can do so. The other issue I want to mention is that it seems simple to provide a list, but I will tell you that those lists change all the time. And while we'll do our best to tackle each and every tier, we know that there's going to be properties put on, properties taken off, properties that shift down to a different tier. So there'll be a little bit of squishiness as we start going through this process, but I think that what's being offered here will be a much more methodical and reasonable way to tackle the issue, rather than just assuming, well, we're going to turn everybody off, because we know we can't do that. We don't have enough personnel to tackle 14,000 vacant structures, which, by the way, is a reduction of almost 1,000 properties since about 6 months ago. So HCD is also tackling this on the other side, too, trying to limit those number of vacants that occur. And I see you have a question.
Real quick, Madam Chair, real quick. So are we making contact to those owners to tell them that is the law? I mean, how would they know that? I mean, when you do, you're going to shut it off, but do they know that's the process or that's the law? Are we making sure property owners know that?
So I guess are we going to have an education piece once this bill is passed?
I'm saying if the person don't know that, are we sharing that information with them if it's the law? If it's the law is the law. So are we sharing that information? Because is it on your website? Or you do a mail-in when you get if you're still getting your water bill, if it ain't paperless, you get all that information. Are we making sure that information that the property owners know that is the law? And if we not, we just go in because it's vacant and shut it off, but they don't even know that's the law.
If I may.
Yes, housing, Stephanie?
So the notice that we provide to the homeowner is the vacant building notice. The red light's on. Can you hear me okay? Okay. We do provide the vacant building notice to the owner of record, and then in the future, there are often failure to abate notices issued to them. So in that vacant building notice are all of the things that need to be done to bring that building back online. If the water is shut off, as is required by the current law, that any building with the vacant building notice is referred to DPW and they shut it off, that it can be turned back on as part of the process of abating that vacant building notice, because they're certainly going to have to do more than get the water back on. The water shouldn't, we're trying to work down this massive list, and we are, for the record, under 14,000 vacant properties now. We're in the high 13s. So we want to make sure that while we're taking some properties offline, we also want to put properties back online. And it's a delicate balance between what the law is actually requiring us to do and then the case-by-case referral, I think, are cases when we need to expedite the process because of issues like burst pipes or squatters or things like that. So I think best case scenario, we wouldn't want to have to turn off the water because they're already in the process of abating their vacant building notice.
Okay,
Hope that
thank
helps.
you. We'll move, Councilwoman Ramos, I think you had a comment on this.
Yeah, I have a question. I really appreciated in your bill report how you basically took the lists and broke it down by priority and then by district in terms of where the properties are, et cetera. So I appreciated that very much. I'm wondering the timeframe in terms of, are you starting on the demo list yesterday? Or when do we expect to start to see, well, we won't see it, but when this starts to happen, because I can actually do an analysis of the VBNs in my district and I can figure out exactly what the tiers are. And so I'm wondering, what the time frame is that we're talking about here in terms of when this is going to get started. And then my second question to DPW is, there's a lot of properties I know, so I just didn't know whether you needed additional capacity. You always need additional capacity.
I don't know if both of those questions were directed at DPW?
The last one is
The
to you,
last
the
one.
first one is to DHCD.
No, we feel that using this tier system will enable us to work through these with the current personnel that we have, and that our meter shop will be able to do these. By prioritizing, it helps us establish locations. These will come across as work orders, and we can work right through them. We estimate that if we had a sufficient list, once we have a sufficient list, that we could probably perform 20 turnoffs a day, based on, location. Sometimes when we go on site, we may have to dewater the meter vault and do some other things, but for the most part, we feel that a crew could tackle 20 a day once we had the list.
Thank you. And housing, I think, to add to that piece?
Yes, sure. Oh, go ahead, Jason.
The priority ones, that list has been generated, already reviewed and sent over to DPW. So those cutoffs are, I believe, underway, from my understanding.
Okay.
And then, so, just to follow up, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
That's okay.
So the priority ones, I can do the quick math at some point. You'll finish those, and then you'll get the priority 2 list. Is that how this is working?
Yes.
Okay.
And we would kind of reevaluate things as we go on, because things could bump up or bump down, so we're not using that stagnant list. So it may be that when we come back around, other properties are now priority 1s, but then there's the priority 2s as well that could be worked into that list. But for that first round, we just started with that 500 because it was a reasonable number for them to begin to tackle and see how it goes.
So what if a priority 1 is next to a priority 2? And then it's not very efficient in terms of like having to bring back? Is that something that the meter shop, well, the meter people wouldn't know that it's a priority 2 because they don't have the priority 2 list, they have the priority 1 list. I'm just trying to think of, how to be efficient, and that's probably something you're thinking through as well.
Yeah, we've had a couple meetings to get to the point where we're at, and the idea was to move forward with those initial 500. In many cases, those are grouped together. So, if we're doing a demolition, we're probably doing multiple properties. And so they're taking kind of everything on that block or in that group of vacants. But the idea is to then revisit this list and revisit and look for those efficiencies of what the meter shop can handle, what makes sense, and obviously, working geographically and becoming more efficient makes sense.
Right, and then the priority 5s, those are some of the ones that we may see pop off the list because they're going to get rehabbed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that priority 4s or 5s will really get cut for the vast majority of those, because they'll be under permit and they'll be constantly cycling off. And so there'll be new 4s and 5s. Some of those for various events may drop down to become 1s. If there was a fire or other vacancies
Sure.
in the block, it could very well drop to a 1 or a 2. But I think the majority of 4s and 5s, based on the work that the agency's doing and the market does, they shouldn't see cutoffs. They should see abatements prior to them getting to the cutoff stage.
Okay, and then the other piece is really just looking at I guess you answered it by saying my question was really about, we get calls in our offices, or I'll just speak for myself. I get calls in our office about, various concerns about properties and people putting in 311s, or that they see somebody in the building or something like that. I mean, I guess just to be clear, I don't think that, what is going to be the policy if there is somebody in the building using the water? Because we do have an affordable housing crisis, and people are living in some of these properties. And that's one of the reasons why I think some folks wanted this, but I just want to get a sense of what's going to be the action if people are expecting that the water's going to be turned off, and then is that going to happen if there's somebody there?
Yeah. So, and that could be any one of these priorities, 1 through 5.
Correct, it could be any of them.
And we recognize that. So the current policy and how we deal with these situations where there's people in properties is first to do our best to try and determine whether or not the person has a legal right to be there. And we see those cases where neighbors start reporting seeing people on a property, and we get out there and the people have a legal right to be there. They have a lease, they may be related to the owner, and we can establish that. In those cases, we would not take any action unless there was some unsafe condition
Yeah,
that
because usually
existed.
it's an unsafe condition that's an issue.
We get these calls, it's not necessarily that the building is vacant, it may have been sitting empty, but somebody's now living in it. Where it is a vacant building and we've determined that there are squatters, housing coordinates with DPW for the boarding. Sometimes we have to coordinate with the police department for safety issues. We will get the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services and Family and Children's Services involved to help, or our Ombudsman's Office, or both sometimes, to help provide alternative options for the individuals that are in that property. But we will vacate that property and secure it and ask that the water be cut off in those situations. We also coordinate very closely in those cases with BG&E because often there's illegal gas or electric service. So we have contacts within BG&E. They actually will call us out when they come across things, and then we'll call them, and we've been working with them very closely, I'd say, over the last 6 or 7 years with their theft unit, and have developed a great relationship with them. So there's
Yeah, we had a case.
a lot of back and forth, and seen some very crazy, very dangerous things. So it's really great that we have that relationship with them, and we can prevent a lot of potentially extremely hazardous things from happening with that open communication and the ability that our investigators have to contact their investigators and back and forth just with a cell phone call instead of having to go through a more formal like 311 process or their work order system. Sometimes that gets a bit more complicated, but when they discover something, they can call David McGinnis and say, I need somebody out here now, and we can do the same thing. A lot more gets done. So we'll continue with that process, and it'll just end up being that a property that's on this list might get bumped to an immediate shut off, or a property that's not even on the list gets added to it and gets shut off because we're having those squatter issues, and we need to make it less desirable to be there.
Right, okay. Well, I appreciate that. That's obviously a consideration when the meter folks are there and they see something.
Yeah, and the same thing goes to if there's a situation where a priority 4 ends up starting to leak and causing damage to a neighboring property. We wouldn't sit back and wait to get there. We would bump that up and work with DPW to make that correction. And in those cases, both with squatters and with like the broken pipes, we'll go through and look to see if we can find the owner. We can get the owner to deal with it. That's much more preferable to us than us having to pull all the city resources to deal with it. So sometimes we're able to get the owners involved. Other times we just have to take the action.
And so especially with that piece about if there's a leak and a resident I don't know that there's a 311 request yet generated to somebody saying that the house next to me has a leak in the, we get the calls, but I just end up asking the inspector to go in as a vacant building inspector to go in. So that might be something to consider as we're looking at all of the 311 things too.
Could I just add for a moment?
Go ahead.
I know that we don't want our folks who go out to turn these services off to be confronted by someone who's in the structure itself. So And it's the same thing when we clean and board. If we encounter that situation, we're going to check back, we're going to find out, we're going to work with HCD to figure out what's going on in that particular structure. So at that point, we would not do anything unless there's obviously a leak spewing all over or creating an issue, then there's no discussion. But we don't want to put our employees in an awkward and possibly dangerous situation should somebody be illegally occupying the structure. So it would be pretty much the same process we go through currently with cleaning and boarding. If we show up and there's activity in there and people in there, we are not slapping, boarding up the windows and doors while they're in there. So we know to back off, to make connections, and to regroup. And we would have to do the same thing here because we don't know, again, if there is some legal opportunity to be living there or what it may be. It may be one of these, somebody passed away and you've got siblings arguing over who has control over the house, those kinds of things that make for a lot of fuzziness in ownership. I will say that turning water off is important, but I will also say it is very easy to override a turn off. So we can go in today and turn off a property, and next week we'll get a call saying so-and-so's living in there, there's water coming out of the building. So one of the things we're looking at internally is how we flag these properties on our system, and is there a way for us to get an automatic notification if a turn-off property is suddenly showing usage. So that's something that we're looking at to see if we can get the system to do that. To try and have a way to, number one, flag this should be off, and number two, if it's showing usage, that either means there's a break or somebody's in there, something's happening that shouldn't be for that property. So we're looking at ways in which we can possibly handle that internally through our existing UMAX system.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's now hear the fire department report. Sophia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The fire department has no objection and defers to Department of Public Work. Thank you.
And the city administrator report?
Greetings, Madam Chair and council members. Alan Robinson here, Assistant City Administrator, representing the Office of the City Administrator. The Office of City Administrator has no objection to the City Council resolution as presented.
Thank you. And the Department of Real Estate? Sophia?
Thank you again, Madam Chair. The real estate also has no objection and defers to Department of Public Work. Thank you.
And you, Councilman Stokes, you had a question?
I just have a question for Ms. Collins. Maybe housing too. How accurate is your information? Because the city have torn down people's houses that they shouldn't have. So now we talk about turning off water, turning on water. How accurate is your data going to be that if you turned off somebody's water to their house, that was the correct house, whether it was a vacant notice or not? Because, you know, we make mistakes, so we have done that a lot of times in different agencies. So I was just talking about what protocols are going to be in place that don't be back and forth. Or we made a mistake, turned that water off, we got to turn it back on. So that's my question.
Well, we are relying on our sister agency, HCD, to, because of the, and again, I don't want to keep pointing to the tiers, but I think it's important to see that there's a lot of work that goes on before somebody gets a vacant building notice on a property. And a lot of that work is constantly trying to get in touch with a property owner who is either passed away or doesn't give a you-know-what about that particular structure. So these are usually, you can usually pretty much tell when you come up, these are unoccupied, but you can also see other times, as we mentioned before, that if there is some measure of occupancy that we're noticing, we're not going to turn off, we're going to double check and reconnoiter and come back at a later time once we figured out what may or may not have been going with that property.
The only reason why I say that, because I had a constituent who lived in his house, and code enforcement said nobody lived there. And they actually lived there. Electric working, you look at the front of the house, the back of the house, I don't know who thought nobody lived there. That house was immaculate from the front to the back. So they actually was going to refer his house to one house at a time. Yeah. The guy actually lived there. So that's what I'm asking, what is going to be in place? I mean, this gentleman lived in his house and actually rehabbed his house. And code enforcement said, oh, that's vacant. I had to call him up to tell him that they say your house is vacant. So I'm not trying to keep beating this up, but what is going to be in place that those kind of things don't happen in terms of dealing with shutting off water and turning it back on and turning it off? We made a mistake, you know. It's got to be something there that we don't keep repeating the same thing that we did. We're turning our houses one house at a time. So I don't understand exactly what are we going to do to make sure we don't make those mistakes when we're shutting off people's water.
Commissioner Hessler?
Councilman, we can certainly talk about any particular property offline. You know how to reach me.
Thank you.
But the vacant building notice is what determines whether or not a property can legally be occupied. And I recognize that individuals sometimes occupy properties that have a open vacant building notice on it, and those properties may have been fully rehabbed and may be or could be ready to occupy, but just still have that vacant building notice on it because the person either didn't go through the proper process of getting the permits and abating the notice, or they may have purchased it from someone who told them it's ready to move in, and that person did not get the right permits and take all the right steps. And when we have those properties, like I do, I have a running list of those properties, and we try to connect with those individuals, and if they are not at fault, you know, they weren't the ones that did it, we try to work with them as gently as possible to get them to where they need to be and abate that vacant building notice so they don't have these problems. And in some cases, we have to be a little bit firmer with people that are rehabbing a property and not getting the proper permits or the use and occupancy. And sometimes that firmer is taking the property to receivership because they won't work with us to get the permits.
Thank you, Commissioner. You're very convincing. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we're now going to do public testimony. We have no one that has signed up in person, but if there's anyone, is there anyone in person that wants to testify on this bill? And seeing no one, we're now going to check online to see if there's any online residents or people that would like to testify on this bill online. And we do not see any raised hands, and we are now checking telephone callers. Please unmute yourself if you would like to have an opportunity to testify. And we see no callers. Is there a motion to recommend the resolution favorable?
So moved. Second.
So moved by Councilman Glover, second by Councilwoman Ramos. Chair Middleton, yes. Bullock? Yes. Yes. Conway absent. Dorsey? Yes. Glover? Yes. Ramos?
Yes.
Yes. And Stokes?
I have some reservations, but I'm going to go ahead and vote yes. Thank you.
That is a yes. This bill will move to second reader at the second council meeting. And I also want to recognize Tyree Hayes, which is a new analyst for council services. That would, if you want to stand a second so they can see you. That's going to be working with the council and our committees for council services. Welcome, Mr. Hayes. And also, we've had some youth workers here that started yesterday, and it was like their first appearance for watching a committee hearing. And I want to thank everyone for attending today's hearing, and this committee is now adjourned.